Welcome to the Agency Uplift podcast, all about the unique experience of growing a digital agency, the ups, the downs, the challenges, the learnings, the opportunities. I'm your host, Sean Lang, agency owner of over 7 years and co-founder of Social Commerce Club. And today I'm joined by Sully Chaudhry, founder of SEO Army. Sully, thanks for being on with me.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Yeah, it's great. So let's dive right in. So can you tell us a little bit about what SEO Army does?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, we are a white label SEO agency. So we help other agencies with expanding their SEO operations. And then we also work with certain businesses. So we're sort of a back end support for a lot of agencies.
Very, very cool. And so is there a specific type of SEO that you do, or is it kind of all the different types of SEO?
Well, we do content-based SEO, I would say, but we also do backlinking, we also do technical on-page fixes, and a large number of our clients leverage us for content. Content's just time-consuming, even with AI. There's brand and tone specifics and other formatting specifics that need to be followed for each client. So we have a lot of experience with content. So
Makes a lot of sense. Is there sort of a specific industry or niche that you serve, or is it more open?
Well, we've been doing it for a while now, so we've worked in pretty much every industry, including some of the more popular ones like legal and SaaS, medical, but we get into travel, all kinds of weird random industries sometimes. So,
Let's get into maybe your origin story a little bit. Why did you decide to start an agency? Was it a conscious decision, or was it more of like a just something that happened?
yeah, so I was between jobs actually. I just left my job as a VP of a startup in Seattle that was focused on medical education and really didn't know what to do, but I always had an entrepreneurial spirit and decided to start this business in the midst of that. And it was called WriterArmy.com was the original name of the business. And then um, we did SEO content, but we did all kinds of content, not just SEO. So that was the first iteration of it. And then kind of just evolved from there into more of an SEO focus. Our first clients were like agencies and law firms. Um, And then I went kind of more full-time into it in like 2016 because I was kind of working and doing the business at the same time for the first few years until it got enough traction. So,
Very, very cool. Yeah, that's not an uncommon story that I hear. So what was the milestone that you needed to hit in order for you to kind of make that decision to go full time to the agency?
I think getting our first high volume client was a big milestone because there were like a few smaller, few $100 a month that just wasn't enough. And then we got
Mm.
one agency that came in and was like, okay, we have like 50 articles a month, and now we're going to increase it to 100 within the next few months. And then now it's like, oh, this has completely replaced my income as a freelancer. So that was a big step when that happened.
So I see that you're primarily a white label now. What kind of led the decision to go from targeting um, brands and companies specifically to working with agencies?
Yeah. So I feel like every entrepreneur goes through this phase where or a lot of them, especially in the agency world, where you start off as a generalist and you start selling everything to everybody. You think
Yeah.
that's the way to get business. And that's the way to shoot yourself in the foot most times. It just doesn't really work that well. Um, and there's a lot that goes into it, like how to find your ICP. But in our case, it was, yeah, we went through that process where we sold everything to everybody, and it just operationally it doesn't work. You can't scale very easily. You get stuck at a certain revenue level. So we just found that I work well with agency owners. It's a natural fit. I like working with that group. We have our best case studies with agencies. We've helped multiple agencies scale to 7 figures, partially through our operations, but also, they had very dedicated founders, of course. So it just was a natural fit to focus on the white label thing. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned the importance of finding your ICP. Do you want to just sort of walk me through your thoughts on the importance of that a little bit? Because I think that it's
Yeah.
exactly like you said. It's really common, especially for new agencies, to not have the ICP nailed down, and it keeps them into a constant like cycle of absolute chaos. So yeah, do you want to just sort of talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. Love to. So it's common pitfall of agency owners where they just think they have to start off as a generalist. And I think, okay, it's an okay approach because you get your first clients and your first revenue, but eventually I do think it's worthwhile to pick an ICP or pick a niche to focus on, whichever niche you have the most kind of experience in, the best case studies, the one that you like working in. Because from a positioning standpoint, from sales, marketing, everything just becomes way easier. When you're selling everything to everybody, especially in 2025, when there's just millions of vendors and agencies, you're not going to stand out very easily. And by picking that vertical, you can start to productize, you can start to create offers that are you're only competing with maybe a few hundred agencies or even less compared to thousands of them.
Yeah.
So it just makes life a lot easier than dealing with the chaos of multi-channel, multiple niches, or even one channel for multiple niches can be chaotic at times. So
Absolutely. It's kind of like that classic cliche of jack of all trades but master of none.
yeah,
It's
and
it's it's really common. That was our experience as well, and I think that it's really easy once you've got your ICP or your ideal client profile defined. It's easy to point the finger and say like you need to have an ICP. Why don't you have an ICP? But I mean, if I'm being perfectly honest, looking back at my agency journey, uh, for at least the first year, maybe even longer, but definitely at least the first year, we didn't have an ICP. And it's kind of wild to think that we didn't.
Mhm.
And I think that our reasons for it were actually very similar to a lot of new agencies now, where when you first get started, you're just trying to get more clients. You're just trying to get more revenue. You're trying to prove that you have a viable business. And so you say, well, not everyone who comes to me is this specific type of client, but at the end of the day, I need the money. And so I'm going to take them on. And I can't imagine a world where I tell people, I can help you, but my agency isn't for you. And so I won't help you. And so we had that same internal struggle, and it was honestly it was kind of a back and forth between me and my partner in the early days, because we both knew that we needed to do it, and I would want to do it and he wouldn't, and then he would want to do it and I wouldn't, because there was just
Yeah.
sort of the feast and famine cycle. But why I say it's really funny that we didn't do it early on, the hilarious thing is, we started our agency because my partner initially, he and his wife had a clothing brand, a children's clothing brand, and just because he's a very curious kind of guy, he thought, hey, I wonder what it would be like if I figured out how to market for this brand. And so he took a bunch of digital marketer courses way back in the day with like Ryan Dice, and Molly Pittman and he learned
Mhm.
how to do digital marketing and got really, really good at it, to the point that people started to approach the brand and say, hey, can you introduce us to your agency? And then he would be like, well, actually, it's just me. And so suddenly he had a whole ton of clients as a result of the work he was doing for the brand. Then he
Mhm.
brought me on and said, hey, I need some help turning this into a business. I have a job as well, and I can't just manage all these clients. So I came in and I helped him turn it into a business to the agency that it is now. But the crazy thing is, you would think that that first that first nugget of strategy, that nugget of information of we're good at doing this for brands, would be the impetus for us to say we're going to start an agency where we work with brands. Nope, no, we just worked with anyone and everyone, and it still took us a year or maybe even two to realize, no, we need to work with direct to consumer brands. So just a little backstory for you and the listeners, that I most of us aren't immune to this. We all start completely wide open, or at least a lot of us. I think that some people don't, but generally those are people who've been in business before and they already understand the importance of an ICP and the power of positioning.
Absolutely. Yeah, similar journey, except it took us way longer to figure it out. I think we would go back and forth between finding the ICP and then trying to sell to other businesses and niches and just yeah, I mean, along the way, people were like, "Well, maybe you should just focus on this one ICP." But I mean, I think that's impressive. You figured it out. So I would say that's soon, even though some people know, like you said, like some experienced entrepreneurs know from the beginning that it's one ICP they serve as an agency owner. So it's a common pitfall. Yeah. And I see people that are 5, 6, 7 years in and they still haven't figured out the ICP thing. So
Yeah, yeah. How how would you advise some of the newer agency owners listening who haven't solidified an ICP yet? How would you advise them on how to figure out what that ICP is for them? Because I think some of them know that they need to, but they don't know how to.
yeah, that's a good question. So look at your most successful case studies, and that's kind of a good litmus test because for us, it was obvious. We had this client and that client that were a few $100 a month or 1,000 a month, and then there's one that's like 6,000 or 7,000, and it's like, clearly this is who we're serving well because of who we are, because of our expertise or my expertise plus the team. And so people will think, well, I want to get in this market, I want to get in this channel or that channel, but what are people paying you for now? That is a uh, clearly based on your skills, on what you do, what you deliver. And that's, look at the data, look at where the revenue's coming from, and just 10x that. So it's like you would do with a marketing test. You find the one campaign that works well and 10x it. Really the same thing goes for your business. And it's okay to start off as a generalist so that you know who that is, I guess, because a lot of people don't know who that client is, who that ICP is. So then starting off as a generalist, you can start to navigate the waters and figure that out. So
That's very true. Sometimes you need to have multiple opportunities at bat to actually understand where your time is best spent. So I absolutely agree with that for sure. So your agency has been around for a significant amount of time now. Was it 12 years or was it longer than that?
yeah, if you count like the time I was freelancing, 12, 9, if you include 2016 to now, about 9 years. Yeah.
Okay. So you have seen a lot of change in the digital marketing ecosystem as a whole. I mean, our agency has
Yeah.
been around for 7 years, and I feel like every 6 months we're in a completely different world, a completely different landscape, different policies to abide by, different economic climate, things that are working now, or things that were working are no longer working now. So how have you seen change, or how have you seen your agency change since you started it as a result of just the life cycle?
Yeah, you're right that it's changed. Everything changes even sometimes more often than 6 months. And so the way we evolved has, we're not the same agency at all, not even the same brand. It's the same entity, I would say, but everything else is so different. Um, Again, more of that generalist focus, but also just the people, the team, and the onboarding and SOPs and processes and having good, we had no systems when we started. I didn't know what an SOP was. Um, and then obviously AI came and that's a whole nother conversation, but that completely changed everything. So we are definitely a much more agile, efficient operation. At one point we had like 70 people at the company,
How
and now
many?
there's maybe like 70.
70. My goodness, that's a serious
Yeah.
operation.
Yeah, but it was chaotic. It wasn't like organized. It was there was very little discipline in that type of organization. Which again, as even as a relatively new entrepreneur, I would never. I'm not saying I would never scale to 70 people again, but I would do it in a much more methodical way.
Hmm.
So we have way fewer people now, which is, it's a much more professional, streamlined operation now than what it was.
Yeah, I would bet. I mean, I would assume, as someone who's scaled an agency as well and seen just the sheer amount of waste that results from not having things documented and not having processes and SOPs. I would assume that you could probably accomplish the same amount of output with less people now that you're more put together, you're more organized,
More output, I would say.
more
Yeah.
output, and I'm sure that once you layer in automation and AI to that, it's significantly more.
Mhm. I think as we build out SOPs, we're still building out new ones and things like that, but the output is so much higher from less people. And another topic we can talk about, people, a lot of agency owners think that the solution is to hiring more people, but a lot of
Yes.
times they're missing the SOPs and processes and systems that are going to get allow them to get much more out of their current team. So,
I'm so glad that you brought that up. That's actually one thing that I've talked about a little bit in the course that I put together, which is basically once you start to feel, or once agencies in general start to feel that crunch, that like, oh, we're at capacity, their first knee jerk reaction is, I need to hire people. I need to hire people. And I mean, I'm sure you've been in that situation. I've made that mistake for sure, but
Mhm.
it's kind of similar to taking taking a organization or a system that isn't defined and then automating it. All you're doing is just you're just increasing the amount of chaos and lack of clarity. One thing that I always advise people to do, and I'm assuming this is going to be in alignment with you, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts, is if you get to that point where you're like, we're at capacity, we need to hire someone, you don't hire someone at that point. At that point, you actually look at what everyone is doing. And so often what you should really do, if you haven't done this, is you should do some kind of time audit and see where people's time is actually going, because realistically that's going to show you that maybe we've gone a little bit off track, off course. Maybe we're actually spending our time on things that don't matter. So maybe we can actually eliminate waste, eliminate things that we're doing. Maybe that means that we actually need to better define our processes and SOPs. And so if we do that across the org, then maybe that actually takes our we're at 99% capacity. Maybe that actually drops you down to 80%. Guess what? Now you don't need to hire somebody. But
Mhm.
if you do find that you're still at capacity now, everything is defined, then your next step is to say, okay, how can I compound the capacity that I currently have, or the bandwidth that I currently have, with automation, with AI, etc., and then do that,
Mhm.
and that should again create more capacity for you. And only then, after you've got the right people doing the right things, you have it documented, you have things automated, you have the right people in the right seats, then you say, okay, now we actually do need to hire someone. But hiring should be like the last step, because in order to
Yeah.
make a good hire, like you really have to focus. You or someone senior has to focus. They need to take their eye off the ball over there to make sure that we're bringing in the right people over here. So that's critical. But then there's also just there's the massive time suck. But then there's also the fact that even like the most successful people in the world at hiring have like a 50% track record, because people are people, and somebody will show up one way through the recruiting process and the interview cycle, and then they might show up a completely different way the minute that you hire them. They might not be who you thought they were, or they might be who you thought they were, but life happens. Somebody gets sick, somebody ends up having to move. Like it's never a guarantee ever, which is why hiring people should honestly be the last thing that you do. For those reasons, and also so many more. But I could literally talk for an hour on this topic. What do you think about what do you think about that?
Well, I completely agree with you on everything you just said. I think agencies will look at bringing more people when they have missing SOPs, when they have no onboarding process, no systems in place, no automation, or it's not where it needs to be at all. And it's because everyone's busy at the agency. Everyone's caught up in all kinds of things that they think they should be doing or are doing. So that's not the first, I guess hiring is not the first place that people should go to, agency owners should go to, because it adds more complication to an already difficult situation that needs to be probably fixed internally first. And I'm not saying hiring's never the solution, because it often is, but it's, have you done those things first? Like you said, have you done that audit of time? Is everyone's time being used the most efficient way, the most based on their skills, based on their expertise? Is somebody wasting time doing things they shouldn't be doing because it's just they're not efficient at it? And that will probably uncover a lot of opportunities. And there's so many things that should be automated for agencies these days. Even things like lead acquisition and marketing, certain types of marketing and stuff for their own business, or delegated. But whatever it is that's holding up the growth needs to be looked at, maybe sometimes from a consultant's perspective, because when you're in the forest, you can't see what's going on. So
Absolutely, it's really really true. I had a mentor who would often say, and I'm gonna misrepresent it because I never say it correctly, but he would often say something to the effect of, when you're inside the jar, you can't read the label on the outside of the jar, and so you actually need somebody on the outside to be able to tell you what the label says, because often we're so close to the problems that we're facing that we don't actually see them for what they are, and it can be actually the fixes can be very very obvious. It's a hard lesson to learn, but once you have that experience where someone's like, "Have you thought about this?" and then you kind of go, "No, I haven't," but now that you mention it, that's a really smart thing that I should do right now. And all it takes is someone just to ask that question for you to be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
right, right." So,
Yeah.
oh, sorry. I feel like you have something to add to that.
Yeah. I've had so many conversations with great consultants on LinkedIn, even though some of them didn't turn into actual transactions, but just the insight, just having a call with somebody that can provide the guidance and someone that has scaled an agency too is just so valuable. So, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. When you've been there before, you have the ability to notice things from far off and say, "Oh, it's going to be another one of those," or something, because things happen in patterns. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes there are novel new things that we've never seen before, but in most situations it's just like another version of something that's happened before, and we need to make that kind of decision. We need to understand it for what it is. Is it a distraction? Is it really a threat? Is it a shiny object, etc. um,
Mm.
you mentioned agencies using tools and automations and AI. I'm just curious, what are some ways that you're using automations and AI at your agency?
Yeah. So AI, on the content side, we don't use it for writing content, but we use it for things like keyword research, competitor research, content outlines, any form of research to help the writers. We'll use um, tools, AI tools, or GPT directly, or other tools that can help with that. But we definitely do a lot of editing on the content and make sure that it's up to brand and tone specifics. Certain things that just can't be automated, but we have systems for those things and processes. And then on some of the lead gen side on LinkedIn, we use automation tools for not the content, but the outreach to certain ICPs or prospects. We can use that for sales processes. Um, and then everything else that needs to be done by hand, we are building SOPs and processes and Notion for those situations. But that's a form of automation, I guess, where at least taking things off of my plate that can be done by um, assistants and that sort of thing. I'm sure there's other situations off the top of my head that I'm not thinking of, but we're definitely leveraging AI every day for a lot of stuff with strategy too, even sometimes. So,
Yeah, it's really good. It's a really good way to help you flesh out areas where you're maybe not seeing the full picture. And I might say, well, have you considered this? And then it at least gives you the option to be like, oh, I haven't considered that. That's not part of this. Or I haven't considered that. I should add that. That's actually a really good. That's a really good addition. It just lets you kind of add a little bit more meat to it. Um, so as an SEO agency, um, I can tell you that for me specifically, I've been quite ignorant of SEO for the majority of my career in marketing. It's not something that my ICP talks about a ton in the e-commerce and GDC space, although that is kind of increasing now. But what would you say are some things that agencies get wrong about SEO?
there's a lot. I think every agency is so different, and I think it's really hard for people to paint the same brush for every agency because it's every agency has a different approach to SEO. One agency will do a bunch of backlinks on link farms and it'll publish content without editing or use some automation tool. And that stuff ends up penalizing or ends up backfiring in most cases. And even I'm amazed even today, people still use link farms and use low quality publications for SEO, which just don't work. They never have. Um, like I think our approach is so different because we focus on things like podcasts, like PR opportunities, local SEO, local publications, relevant directories, relevant publications that are accepting guest posts. So we'll do a lot of heavy lifting to get good quality backlinks. And a lot of agencies just don't put the work in. They just don't. Sometimes they don't have the team or the resources to do this type of thing. But you have to invest if your client's investing with you, you have to invest, to make sure they're getting a good output, a good result. And um, I just think that there's some agencies can be careless at times. I think we have to with SEO, you have to be very methodical. You have to be very careful about the steps that you take. And I think that's something that's very important to us. Same thing with the content. We run it past the clients. We get approvals for everything in terms of their brand and tone, internal linking, external linking, and all the other steps that we take. We handle those. Of course, we take care of all of those, but just in terms of the quality of the content, we make sure that it's up to par with the clients. And that's why agencies will use us because we have that sort of commitment to detail, which a lot of um, it's hard to find that sometimes, I think, in the space.
Hmm.
But yeah, there's a lot of just in my experience in working in the space, it's hard to find an agency that does these extra steps to make sure the output is good and that there's actual good real results from what we do. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
I do know that SEO is definitely something that a lot of agencies consistently wonder, should we add this as a service? Can we add this in house? Should we white label it? And I think that it's fairly common for agencies to decide to white label it because it's outside of their realm of expertise. So let's say an agency is considering adding a white label partner for SEO. How do you integrate with agencies? What does that look like?
Yeah. So for the agencies that want to offer it, we customize the program, so there's no upfront cost or anything. So I'm like sort of the head of SEO for a lot of these agencies, and of course we have other team members, but I can jump on calls and help them close deals, and they can use our case studies. So if we have a partner in place, we'll be like, okay, you want to focus on a vertical. We've worked in almost every vertical out there, so we probably have a case study or at least SEO content examples on those industries. And then we'll do like a free SEO audit. So if they want to do an audit for a potential client, we do a very detailed, not just like an SEM rush automated thing, but we'll dive into, um, ranking opportunities, competitors, technical SEO problems, and agencies can white label that audit and use their logo as a sales tool. Um, we can even create case studies based on anything that they've done with SEO. So a lot of times they may have done some SEO stuff like some content, but there's no case study. So if they want help with creating case studies, and then we have very scalable, affordable pricing. So they usually just take a package and they mark it up 2x or 3x or more. So
That makes a lot of sense. Well, Sully, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Where could people find out more about you and SEO Army?
yeah, so just if you just go to seoarmy.co, that's our website. There's an app that you can log into, and then there's a free audit opportunity inside of the app once you log in. So just the website, seoarmy.co.
Very, very cool. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Appreciate it.